This is the Hope Not Note podcast,
where we answer your questions and share inspirational stories to fill your soul with hope.
Our mission is to empower hope to those who have been plagued by nope.
I'm Dr. Dillon Caswell.
And I'm Brandi.
And we're here to bring you out of the nope and into hope.
Welcome back to the next episode of the Hope Not Note podcast. We are so excited that you are here tuning in, and we are thrilled to be with you. Dylan and I recently got married, and we recently also got back from our honeymoon. We had such a great time, and our hope stories, which we share at the beginning of every podcast, for me, is going to come from our honeymoon, and I think yours might as well. And so why don't you dive in, share your hope story, and inspire the listeners.
Yeah, so my first hope story, first podcast with a wedding ring on.
Ayo!
So if you like it, put a ring on it. Did it. Thank you, Beyonce, for that piece of wisdom. So my hope story it's from our honeymoon, and I'll just kind of sum it up with this, that there's so many incredible moments that happen, and there's so many pictures and videos that we can share that show all the hope. But these pictures and videos don't show the nope that we had to go through for this hope to happen. And I think sometimes we forget that, nope is necessary. We just want it in moderation. Similar to things that we enjoy, like coffee, pizza, chocolate, desserts. Like, these things aren't inherently bad for you, but if you have too much of it, then it becomes bad. If you don't have any of it, well, you're becoming complacent. So many times in Italy, we had a plan that did not work. Completely fell through the cracks, and there's really not much that we could have done to change it, from navigating public transportation to getting the wrong directions to just reading articles, but then that not translating to what's happening in real life. So many times we had this happen, and we have all these incredible pictures and videos and moments and memories that we can share, and you'd see them on social media and you would go, wow, that looks like an incredible time. And it was, but it doesn't show all the things that led up to it. So for us, what we learned from this is that we may have a plan, we may think that we have a way, and the rejection that redirected us ultimately led to better outcomes than we ever could have thought or imagined. Mm-hmm. So if that's happening to you, don't give up. Don't feel like it's not meant to be. You have to continue to persevere through that nope, and it will bring you to these incredible moments. And just like quick ones, we got to do a private boat tour around the island of Capri. We got to have dinner with two Italians on their rooftop, and they made it home cooked for us. We got to go swim in a cave with the jellies and even get stung by a couple of jellyfish. We got to rent a Vespa and cruise around the Amalfi Coast with it. But again, all these stories, it'd be a bit to share all of the background behind how it actually led to these moments. But for me, that was the big takeaway, is that, yeah, when you get bumped off a path that you think that you had, it's because there's a better path that's waiting for you that's going to just blow your mind.
100%. And, I look back at the honeymoon and I think of, we got to meet and shake hands with Pope Francis, like, who, not a lot of people can say that. And the people that can say it are probably like us. We were starstruck and just like inspired and almost like humbled by the grace and the beauty of the moment. But then at the same time, like, we encountered conflict getting to restaurants and realizing they don't open for 2 hours and not knowing what to do, carrying our bags, around for probably 4 hours, if not more, and just like feeling sweaty and heavy. And, we may not have got to work out at a CrossFit gym for 2 weeks, but carrying our luggage and walking 20,000 plus steps nearly every day is crazy. And even like there were times where we were not feeling well for a lot of the honeymoon, but you could look at, I don't know, those negative moments, or you could look at those challenges, or you can look at the gift, right? In the book, in your book, you talk about hope and how when we face different challenges or lies or mislabels, we can use that to either fuel our fire and become more optimistic and more joyful, or we can use that to almost let it like burn us, right? And I think that our honeymoon is a perfect example of, there were challenges that we faced, but instead of allowing that to bring us down, it really like fueled our fire to be even more inspired while we were in Italy.
Yeah, and adding on to it, another thing that I took away from it is the further you travel away from home, the more that you really cherish what what is your home?
Mm-hmm.
And we met incredible Italians. I think partly it's because Brandi and I are both Italian, and a lot of people thought that we were actually from Italy. So they'd interact with us and share conversations, and we'd be like, we don't really know what you're saying. Like, we're English and the American type of English. And it was funny navigating that. But so many people really went out of their way to help us and make sure that we knew where we were going or what kind of food to get or what to look out for, whether it was Google Translate or body language. But so many people helped us, which, we'll never be able to appropriately thank the people for the thank you that we want to give them, because in person we said thank you. But, to be lost, to be frustrated, to not know where you're going. Another thing, we grow up in America. Here's a map of Italy. There's Naples, there's Rome, and that is not the names of those places. Like, Rome is an easy one. It's actually Roma, but Naples is what? Napoli.
Yeah.
So all these maps that you're looking for it on Google Maps. Where's Naples? Well, Naples is in Florida. Napoli is in Italy, like Sicily, Sicilia. So it's like all these little things that you don't really know until you're in it, in the chaos. And these people were so willing to help us out. It really gave me a lot to think about and ask, when I meet a foreigner in the United States, am I going out of my way to help them? Because, man, I understand that frustration now, and that almost fear. Like, how do I get on this train? I need to get on this train to get to this next location to have a place to sleep. And I don't know what train to get on because the board is off and the language barrier and this employee's not helping me. But then there's this person that comes up and shows you a way. So, all the little side conversations that we got to have both in Italy and Zurich, and the people that we got to meet really inspired me to say, yeah, like, let's make sure that we are taking care of each other. Language barrier, culture, doesn't matter. Like, you are a human. If a human needs help them out. And so that was incredible.
100%. And I also think too that we have an opportunity to get stressed out over situations, or we have the opportunity to just be like, this is part of the adventure. And I think that, for our listeners, if you're ever traveling really anywhere or just in life in general, if there are curveballs, look at the people that can help around you, but also if there are curveballs, just allow it to be part of the adventure rather than getting stressed out about it not going the way that you planned. Because at least in our life, every time we plan something and there's a curveball, it ends up being better than what we could have imagined. And I think that, our entire relationship is testament to that. Our goals and our hopes and our dreams, I know that they're going to be even better than what we can imagine, because we have the openness of it's part of the adventure.
Yeah, and we've quoted him before, but Jimmy Valvano, don't give up, never give up. Like, you have to keep moving, and we can look for this evidence, this victim mentality that, it wasn't meant to be. And I'm going to jump into this quick. There's a research study on this that's pretty interesting that looks at this idea of a victim mentality. And what they did is they drew scars on participants' faces and then told them, go into this interview. In that interview, I want you to look for signs that you're being discriminated because of the scar on your face. When they left the room, the makeup artist went back up to the subject and said, oh, let me just touch this up for you a little bit. And they wiped the scar off the face. So from there, they now go into the interview. The subject thinks they have the scar on their face, but they don't. And they're looking for ways that they're getting discriminated because of the scar on their face that doesn't actually exist. They come out of that interview, they have pages and pages and pages, and can recall all these ways that they were discriminated because of the scar on their face that, again, wasn't there. So if we're looking for these things to show us that this was not meant to be, this is not the way, and we forget that, no, keep persevering, help is on the way, you start to give up your goals, you start to give up your dreams. It's hard to keep pushing in the face of adversity, but it is so worth it. Like, doing that allowed us to shake hands with the Pope.
Yeah.
Like, doing that in our lives is what allowed us to even be able to go on a honeymoon to Italy from the beautiful community that we've been so honored to just be a part of, and to grow and just learn more and more from people, and how generous people, have been. But it all started with Brady and I both saying, like, this is an adventure. Like,
Mm-hmm.
if you throw a curveball, I'm putting my weight on my back foot. I'm waiting for that curveball to break. I'm sending it to the opposite field. See you later.
Yep, exactly. Exactly. And
Unless it's Andy Wegman throwing the curveball, which
yeah.
is one of our awesome listeners, but that dude had a nasty curve. You're not hitting that thing. So shout out to Wags.
Shout out to Andy. We hope that our hope stories inspired you this week and can encourage you. And now we're going to jump into our questions. So, our first question is from a listener named Alan. And he asks, why do I feel my joints ache when the weather changes?
Alan, great question. It happens a lot, especially this part of the season when we're transitioning from summer to fall and then fall to winter.
Mm-hmm.
And where we're at, there's kind of not this transition anymore from summer to fall to winter. It's, goes from 80 degrees one week to 40 or 50 degrees the next week. So there's these big fluctuations in temperature. And people feel this. They feel this in their joints. The older that people get, they start to feel it more and more. I know when it's going to rain. I know when it's going to get colder. I know when a cold front's coming through. A lot of people kind of joke about it, or they'll laugh at them and be like, no, you don't, or you watch the weather. But the truth is that people can feel this. And the reason is because our body is packed with all these different types of receptors to be able to feel everything that's happening in our environment, right? So there's receptors for our pH balance. There's receptors for how much, sun the body's taking on. There's all these receptors, but this receptor that allows us to know that the weather is changing or rain is coming on, they're called baroreceptors. Baroreceptors, they feel the atmospheric pressure, and then they send that up to the brain. The brain interprets that and says, something's changing because I can feel that. Now, the brain is patterned that joint signal that's coming up is associated with this thing happening in the environment. So from neuroplasticity, neurons that fire together, wire together, then the system starts to fire more and more. Weather changes, my knee hurts. That means that the weather's changing, rain's coming, snow's coming. So then it becomes a conditioned behavior as well as a true neurological input that's occurring. So when does this happen? Because there's a lot of people that don't feel when these things happen. And it happens in those that have had a sensitized nervous system, meaning that they're, for whatever reason, it could be a trauma, it could be injury, which is a trauma. So we'll just say it's a trauma, that their body wants to feel more of what's happening to figure out how do I continue to survive. So it's taking in a lot of info. The brain isn't processing it fully and figuring out, okay, what do I need to send a signal for, and what can I just say, now it's not worth our time and effort. Let's put that away or put that to the side. So the sensitized nervous system starts feeling this and it starts sending these signals over and over again. With that being said, due to the gift of neuroplasticity, you're not stuck with that feeling. Mm-hmm. A lot of people don't care to really change it though, because it's like, it's not really inhibiting their life too much. Some people it does, but most people, they're just like, yep, weather's changing, rain's coming in, and they think it's kind of cool. It's like a little party trick.
Right.
But if it is something that kind of is inhibiting you from living your daily life, you can take control of it by desensitizing your nervous system. And there's plenty of ways to do that. Movement, gratitude, deep breathing, a lot of different ways to achieve that, but you can do that.
As you were talking, I thought back to when I was in high school and college, and I was going through my complex regional pain syndrome. And my dad, he's had a quote unquote bad back for most of his life. He had back surgery before I was born, and he's just always kind of lived with this, back pain. And so he's very much, oh, the weather's changing, I can feel it in my back or my shoulder type of guy. But then when I was going through my complex regional pain syndrome, that is 100% just my nervous system feeling everything. And so I can relate back to feeling the weather, right? But now I don't even think twice about it. It's just not even, but I think part of that is I've gone through great healing. I work out regularly. I practice gratitude nearly every day and positive affirmations every day. And so I'm not paying attention to if the weather's affecting my body or not. I'm just I'm thankful I've kind of moved past that. And so I can speak to both sides of those things.
Yeah. And we see this the most common with complex regional pain syndrome and people that have just had surgery, like a joint replacement or a back surgery. And why does that happen? Oh, my knee must have new receptors in this component that was put. No, your nervous system's freaking out because it's like, hey, another human just cut into me.
I just got sliced open.
I just got sliced open, with the thought of like, we're helping, but like immediately post-op, it doesn't feel that way for people. They're like,
Mm-hmm.
this hurts. Like, this is a different type of pain, but it hurts. And the nervous system's trying to figure out, like, what the heck?
Mm-hmm.
Like, I was just put unconscious and someone cut into me. What happened? Like, how did I let that slide?
Yeah.
And it's trying to figure this out. So it starts feeling more and more and more. And yeah, it's the exposure. And Brandi said something super important in there. She said, I've gone through great healing. I exercise, I practice gratitude daily. And just from that statement, it's a multiple prong approach.
Mm-hmm.
Like, if you're practicing gratitude but you're not moving, you're not giving your nervous system evidence that it doesn't need to feel these things. If you're just moving and not practicing gratitude, your nervous system's trying to figure out, hey, why do you keep doing this to me?
Mm.
Like, what is this purpose? What are we doing this for? So we have to have those components both in there.
Yeah. Oh, I love that. Alan, great question. At this time of year, with it being in the middle of fall and winter's coming, I know that there's listeners who are probably wondering the same thing. And so we hope that our insight was helpful for you all. Our next question is from a listener named Vinny, which made me really excited because one of our B&B hosts when we were in Italy was named Vinny. And so I saw the name and I was like, yes.
Yeah.
But he asks, I see a lot of athletes using cold plunges. Should I start doing that too?
That's a great question, and yeah, Vincenzo was great. It was
Yeah.
so hysterical. He kept claiming that his English wasn't great, and his English was phenomenal. Like,
Phenomenal.
it was so
So
great,
good.
and great time just bonding with him and learning about the culture with him. It was hysterical because there was one night he made a meal, and he was trying to think of the translation of the meal from Italian to English, and the meal was a frittata, which had like salami and pepperoni and prosciutto in it. And he's trying to think of, okay, what's the translation of this word? And we're having dinner with him, and we go, then you made a frittata. And he goes, frittata!
Yeah.
And we're like, yeah. And I'm like, and there's salami in there and pepperoni. He's like, salami, pepperoni. He's like, that's how you say that in America? Like,
Yeah.
yeah, it's like the name of it. Like, we kept the name of it. And he was so excited. He was
Yeah.
like,
It was
yeah,
awesome.
he's like, oh, like, you guys just speak Italian. Like, no, we speak meats and food.
Yeah.
Like, that's it. So that was fun. But the question about cold plunges, we're seeing this happen more and more and more. And the answer is the classic that it depends.
Mm.
Do you need to use a cold plunge? No. Can you use it? Sure. But it depends on what is your goal. And I'm not going to go too far into the rabbit hole of research behind this because it's developing more and more and more. But
Sure.
there are a lot of health benefits to cold plunging. One of them is that it activates brown fat, and brown fat seems to have a lot of health benefits throughout our system. So activating brown fat from a cold plunge is a really great thing to happen for overall health. Now, after an athletic performance, is it a good thing to cold plunge? Well, what do you have the next day? In something like the CrossFit Games, where they just did 3 to 5 events, and they have another 3 to 5 events tomorrow, and another 3 to 5 events the next day. You're doing whatever you can to be able to feel okay for that next day.
Mm-hmm.
So they're using cold plunges after almost every event, but it's also like how much heat that their body's creating that they're getting the cold plunge to bring their temperature down so that they can start to recover to then get ready for the next one.
Mm-hmm.
Now, if it's a practice or it's a game and you don't have anything the next day, and let's say that your goal is to develop strength, like that's your goal, hypertrophy, getting strength, cold plunge is shown to actually inhibit strength gains.
Mm.
So if you're a bodybuilder or, I don't know, football or hockey athlete, and you're trying to pack on muscle, and you just put an hour session in, and then you go to cold plunge, you're starting to work against yourself with
Mm.
the goals. On the flip side of this, if you're an endurance athlete, the cold plunge has actually been shown to improve endurance capacity. So if you're a cross country runner and you want to improve your distance, improve capacity, then a cold plunge is really good because it helps with type 1 fibers.
Mm.
So you can kind of see the nuances and the science there of that. It really depends on what's going on, what's your competition like, what's the next day have in store, and what are your goals.
Mm-hmm. I I'm so glad you brought up cross country because I remember in high school they had ice baths, which similar to cold plunge,
Mm-hmm.
right? And we would go in after practice, and it was so funny because it was this like old school, like metal I don't even know what it was, and there'd be like 5 of us standing in there and just like huddled together. And there's some funny memories just like standing in the training room,
Yeah.
like in the ice. But I look back and I'm like, I was never educated on what this was doing for me, and I wasn't the strongest cross country runner, don't at all. But I was not educated. It was more of a like, who's tougher to stay in there longer type of thing. But I think now, 10 years, if not more, since then, cold plungers are so trendy. They're
Yeah.
so trendy right now, which sometimes trends are good. I'm not saying they're not, but I'm glad that you're able to give kind of the wisdom of like, okay, if this is specifically for athletes, this is the wisdom, right? Because I also think of like on a hot summer day, even if you're not an athlete, but it's really hot, you might just want to jump in a cold plunge or a cold pool or a cold shower or whatever to cool down, right? But if you're specifically talking about specific gains as an athlete, I appreciate the wisdom that you shared.
Yeah, for sure. And 2 points from that. The other reason that we could use cold plunge or cold shower is to acclimatize to our environment.
Mm-hmm.
When I was working the sidelines for football, part of their sports med team, leading up to the football season, I was taking cold showers and colder and colder showers. The reason being is because I didn't want to wear sleeves on the sidelines because I thought it would look weak to the players. So I'm like, if I can wear like my polo short sleeve, I wasn't going with a cutoff like that strength coach from Northwestern. Like I was like, nope, not doing that. But if I can wear my polo, then that will show a level of like respect that like this guy can put up with some discomfort, and then it creates that relationship with the athletes of like, okay, you're willing to suffer. Now, if I'm suffering, I'll be more willing to go to you for help. So I'm like, this is the way that I can be the best provider or this is a step of a way to be a good provider to these younger athletes. So I cold showered, and every game, polos. And then the next season, I was like, I'm just going to wear sleeves. Like, I can still give them really good care when I wear sleeves. So, like, I don't need to go through this suffering of cold showers, like really, really cold showers to get ready for that season. So there are different times that you can use it to, acclimate to the weather that's happening. And actually overseas, I think it's the Netherlands. I forget exactly what country it's in, but they do so many things that are really incredible and very intelligent and very intuitive. And they almost hack their nervous system. Like, here all this neuro hacking, but they're ahead of it. So when it starts to get warm, they take really hot showers.
Oh.
And they get like a really good sweat in.
Yeah.
Or on the first like really warm day, instead of like wearing a tank top, they'll put on sleeves or like a sweater. And they'll make it feel way warmer than it actually is. So then when it actually gets to summer, it doesn't feel as warm as it was.
Yeah.
Vice versa, the first cold day of the year, they don't wear like coats or long sleeves. They'll go out in short sleeve so that it feels really cold.
Yeah.
But then the next part, when it actually gets into their winter, it doesn't feel as cold because they already kind of shocked their system from the first time around. So like they're kind of using it in a different way to get their body, I guess, conditioned to the weather that's going to be upcoming for that year, which is fascinating.
It's brilliant.
Yeah. They also leave their babies out in strollers in the winter. Like, it's not like winter like we get in New York, but they'll go to like the coffee shop and they'll leave the strollers outside, and it's very protected and the babies are safe. But their thought is that this builds up the baby's tolerance, it builds up their immunity. And I'm like, wow, that's cool. But I can't imagine doing that here in the States.
Not
like, people would freak
Yeah.
out. There'd probably be some litigation and things like that. But yeah, it's really cool things of temperature of how to do it. And it's kind of cool. It relates back to the first question with like feeling the weather changes and stuff like that.
Yeah. Oh, that's fascinating. There was one year that I did like cold showers through the winter, and I look back and I think it's a good discipline, but I'm also like, sometimes in the winter you just want that cozy warmth, and then to discipline yourself to not have it, it can be tough. But I mean, with most things, it always comes back to like, what's your goal?
Yeah.
What's your desire? What are you trying to get at here?
Yeah. And if one of your goals is, I want to become resilient to suffering and discomfort, a cold shower is a great way to do that.
Yeah. So Vinny, thank you so much for that question. Our last question is from a listener named Amy, and she says, why is my friend always fidgeting and is never able to stay still?
This happens so much. I have a few people in mind that they're always fidgeting. And it can be for a couple of reasons. I'm going to kind of break it down in these two categories, but as I extrovert, I really think it does fall to this one category of sensory stimulation.
Mm.
And usually there's an evolutionary thought to this, that if a person's constantly fidgeting, it's because they don't feel safe, whether that's conscious or unconsciously, but they don't feel safe in their environment. Because if we use this model of a predator and a prey, what is the predator going to go after? Is it going to go after the animal that's constantly moving, or is it going to go after the animal that's completely still? Like, the predator's going to go after that animal that's still. So if I keep moving in my environment, then I'm less likely to be attacked from these old kind of evolutionary survival type of circuits. So that's one reason, is that there's been trauma, they don't feel safe, so they keep moving in their environments, so that unconsciously their autonomic nervous system is saying, less likelihood that I'll be attacked, because the brain works by prediction. So it's doing these things to decrease that likelihood, or the likelihood of that outcome is to happen. So that's one reason. The other reason is that they could be over caffeinated and they have a lot of energy and they need to get it out, right? Younger kids, it's probably they're well, I think we used to be able to say that, kids aren't over caffeinated, but now we see really young kids chugging Celsius, drinking Red Bull, having iced
Drinking
coffee, having
yeah.
Monster Energy drinks. So one, kids should not be drinking that. And like my niece and nephew asked, hey, can we start drinking Celsius? I'm like, well, the NCA banned it, and it's 200 milligrams of caffeine. You haven't had a cup of coffee. This is equivalent to like 5 cups of coffee. No, I don't think it's a good idea for you to start drinking this drink. So these younger kids and this younger generation, like, they should not be having these drinks. It is so dangerous for them. So that's, yeah, let's not give our youth these crazy energy drinks.
Yeah.
And a lot of times there are kids that they're just energetic. They just want to play. And I was watching this thing the other day that was talking about how cars have changed over the past 150 years, how the how businesses have changed, how computers, how cell phones have changed the past 150 years. And the one thing that has not changed is the classroom. We're still in rows. You still have to raise your hand. It's still an 8 to 9 hour day. And the reason that this person was presenting on that this happens is because the original school system was set up to get you ready for the workforce, aka factories, in which you work 8 to 9 hour shifts. You're in a line. You raise your hand when it's your time to talk. You have breaks every hour or 2 hours. You have a time for lunch, and then you're back into the factory. So schools haven't really changed. And we know all the science shows that humans are meant to move. Like, this should not be a surprise to anyone that we are built to move. We are not built to sit for 8 to 9 hour days. And sadly, we see schools kind of taking away phys ed and taking away the time that they have to move. And it's like, we can't do that. Like, there's a great book called Spark by Dr. I think John Ratty, but he talks about this school that they implemented. Come in early, like 7:30 in the morning. Let's go to the track. We run a mile, and then we go into your school day. But then halfway through your school day, we hit you with another phys ed class, and then you work out after. And their test scores were better than students in China and Great Britain, like all these places. They did better because they were moving more. So these people that are fidgety, they're like, can I move? Can I move? Can I move? So there's this aspect of, can I move? And then there's this aspect of anxiousness and not feeling safe at the same time. So what I say earlier, I really think it becomes one, because if you're not able to move, you become anxious. And because you become anxious, then you start fidgeting around. So we need to do better getting movement in, whether it's before school or after school or during school. If there are administrators listening, like, please know how important it is for these kiddos to get movement in. I go for a run before the podcast because it gets my brain working better than if I didn't go for a run before the podcast. And I'm no different than these millions of kids that are going to these schools and having to sit in a desk for 8 hours and just be lectured to instead of with. Not all, because there's some really incredible teachers that are out there, but yeah, so that's why we get the fidgetiness. It's the anxiousness, the not feeling safe, the I need to move right now. Let me get up and move. Oh my gosh, the flying 12 hours or however long it was. I'm like, can I like just go and walk up and down the stairs on the plane? Can I like walk up and down the aisle? Like, let me move. Like, this is way too long of sitting. And now we're asking 5-year-olds and 8-year-olds and 10 and 15 and 20-year-olds to do that. Like, oh, come on.
Yeah, we need to move. I think back, I don't know if they're still as trendy, but when fidget spinners and those fidget toys were super like in.
Yeah.
And I remember I got a couple of them and I was like, oh, this is really cool. But I almost felt like it fed into the anxiety piece that I was going through at the time of like, oh, if I don't have it, then what am I going to do? And I would have all these like random anxious tics, but I wasn't pursuing peace and I wasn't getting movement anywhere else in my life at the time because of injury and belief system, whatever. And so I would always be like fidgeting and all these different things, but in reality, I wasn't pursuing peace. And so it was this beautiful thing. Like as I started healing my brain and pursuing peace more intentionally and working out and getting movement in elsewhere, I didn't necessarily need the fidget spinner or whatever. Right. And I think of kids, right? Like if they're going into a doctor's office and have to be in the waiting room, a fidget spinner is probably going to be helpful for them, but they also need other like outside things to do, you know? So it's fascinating. I think fidgeting is such an interesting, I feel like there's probably really great research on it too.
Yeah. And back to the safety component, you know, what helps a lot of kids that have kind of I need sensory input. You know, they love touch. They love trampolines because they're kind of getting this bounce and habituating the vestibular system. And it's kind of, you know, you're bouncing and being brought back up. So it's fun, but you're also getting out a lot of energy. And if you don't go on a trampoline for 30 seconds and jump and see how fatiguing that it truly is, a lot of fun, but yeah. And then we also see that, you know, what helps when somebody's fidgeting because they don't feel safe, compression, right? We've seen, I think if we looked at a graph of fidget spinners and fidgety toys and weighted blankets, we'd see that both of these have increased as kids are feeling, well, kids aren't moving as much as they used to, and they're more separated than they've ever been.
Right.
And social media can be great. Social media can separate people. There's a lot of things going on in our world that causes a separation in kids that they're not getting that personal contact or relationship, that now we need to use these other products to make them feel safe, when in reality, like, we shouldn't necessarily need these products in the first place. Like, we shouldn't need weighted blankets. We shouldn't need fidget spinners, because we should have a system set up that's creating success for them where they do feel like they can thrive instead of survive.
Yeah. Oh, I love it. Great question, Amy and Vinny and Alan. We're so thankful for your questions. And to those listening, these questions, you know, come in from people all over, and there's a wide range of them. There's, you know, things like the weather and the cold plunges and the fidget spinners, but then we also get to talk about our goals and our habits and sometimes more CrossFit questions or physical therapy. Like, we love answering your questions. And so if you have a question and you are listening and, you know, you're on your 14th episode listening and you're like, oh, my question hasn't been answered yet, but you haven't asked it, go head over to our website, go ask it, because we really love to hear what you have to say. And so thank you for tuning in. Thank you for listening. Please consider sharing, rating, reviewing. You help us spread this message of hope by listening and by being involved and by answering or asking questions. And we're so thankful for you. And so please consider helping by asking questions and sharing and rating and reviewing.
Yeah, thank you for listening. We're blown away by the listeners that we have. We're on 14 episodes, which is really young in a podcast. And there's a lot of podcasts that are out there. So we're thankful that, you know, you decided to spend your time with us, the 30 or 40 minutes, however long each episode typically goes. But it is a commitment, and we're hoping that you are benefiting from spending some of your day with us. You know, we love people saying that, you know, oh, we get to listen to you in our car, we get to watch you on our TV, and we get to connect with you. And it's a great way for us to connect with people across the world. You know, we have some overseas listeners. We hopefully have a few more listeners in Italy. But we have listeners in countries that we've never been to before. And that's just incredible that this message of hope can really get to anywhere. And you know, back to the earlier message of, you know, having a plan and who we thought we could reach, and then who this really has the potential to reach. It's out of our control, but there are things that we can do to help that, and sharing and subscribing and doing these things to allow it to become more visible is a huge way to allow that to happen, but it's just incredible, and we're thankful for the listening community that we have. And if you're a day one, reach out to us, because we might have a gift that we can send your way as a big thank you. So, so thank you. Have a great week, and remember, every day is not just a day to be hopeful, it's an opportunity to become hope.